there's the room opening up over there. Yeah, these are the people that were waiting for me. And let me open up the chat here. There's chat. And actually, I want that to be separate though. Now I'm going to share my screen. So that one. Okay, this view I don't need. I do need. Okay, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Just getting organized here. Can somebody give me an audio check with a yes in the chat? And do you see my main dome screens as well? Yes, yes. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, couple of housekeeping things. I'm sitting at my desk and a good friend of mine is watching this stuff. He's never seen it before. So you may hear me talking to him as well as talking to you. In addition, our little Maltese is behaving well, but I may have to go out and get him if he starts barking. So other than those two housekeepings, we will get started. This is a very informal event today, guys. No PowerPoint decks, no syllabus, nothing, but talking about trading news events. And I'm just gonna keep these all relatively centered as, oh, wow. We got a little bit of fun starting in the NASDAQ. Hopefully you guys are seeing that. And you know what I'm going to do? Whenever we're watching one of those, I'm going to drag over the tick with the LRCs on it because I know you guys have been wanting to see more of how this behaves. So we'll put that right there so we can watch it. This type of behavior is not uncommon before a news announcement. This is basically people that weren't flat starting to get flat. And that's a good idea. So rule number one about trading around news announcements, I'll keep it real simple. Rule number one is don't do it. It's really hard and most rookies will lose money. It is nothing like how easy it looks if you look at it 5 minutes afterward. Having said that, if you are going to try to play it, never try to play initial moves. You know, those first reaction moves, they're always sharp, and by virtue of the definition of sharp, unless you were already in and you got lucky, and Lee said something in the chat earlier, you know, take your profits and get out and clear your head. That's exactly the right reaction if that happens. Otherwise, what you're looking for here is extremes. So let's put this back here. I'll bring this out whenever anything exciting is happening. But in the meantime, in fact, while that's happening, while we're waiting for the big announcement, let's have a look at the 5. And we'll stick that right there. And I'm just using the NASDAQ for reference, but you could use the ES as well. It doesn't really matter. What I'm doing here before a news announcement, I'm just getting an idea what the range was for the day. So, you know, you can see it on the domes, obviously, but the reason I do that is I think, okay, if there's a really sharp reaction right at the announcement, which isn't impossible, it sometimes happens. If I see that and it blows down to the extremes of the day and the overnight, which in this case it would if it covered the day, this is the overnight here, I would probably be interested in buying that or selling it, depending on which side we're on, simply because it's asymmetric. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and ask anybody to type in the chat, what do I mean? You don't have to try to spell asymmetric. What do I mean when I say that? Anybody? I should play that Jeopardy music, you know, that dee-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Okay, I see risk reward skew from Josh, yes, and from Amelia, the same thing. Yeah, it's not really buying the bottom and selling in the top. That's really fading. Yes, exactly. Darren hit the word I was looking for. It's imbalance. And if you're going to try to play news, you have to see imbalance, and it doesn't look the same way it does during the day. It's at the really hardcore extremes. And then once you're there, those other things you guys said are true. The risk reward becomes just vastly in your favor. For example, let's say we were going to do the ES. I don't like this 23 level here just because it wasn't all that firm, but there's a pretty good one down at 10. If you look at the Renko or any of the other range charts, 3,000 certainly, 3,010, and a little tiny bit of 20. And we don't play levels, but we want to know where they are. So if it got down there and I saw an avalanche of buyers, then I just hit the market with a one lot. and, maybe use a 3-point stop, and, we could get 30 points going the other way. It's like 10 to 1. So that's what I mean when I say asymmetric. And because, the shock value of a news event, you sometimes get those. You get these distortions. And because the algorithms are turned off, or at least the ones that trade scalps are turned off, it's pretty much just big people speculating. And so, if you develop the skill to read it, it can be a good play. But beyond that, I really want to emphasize that this is fun to watch, and it's really a good education in auction theory and how price discovery works, because you see it real time as the Fed chairman is talking, and as the news conference goes on, you can see different sound bites influencing the tape. But beyond that, beyond learning about that, do not imply anything else here. Don't ever, buy old price levels or sell old resistance levels, quote unquote. Do not, use channels. Don't use the first hour high. Don't use the open 5 range. None of that. Okay, none of the stuff. No sound. Am I talking? Okay, is Bard the only one who cannot hear me? Okay. Yes, it is you. All can hear. Okay. All right. Yes. You know what? Let me drag this over here for a second. I'm rearranging my screen just so I can see your comments a little quicker. Hey, so one of the things we can do a lot in this session, because I did not prepare an agenda or a slideshow, is you guys can throw questions as we're doing stuff. So please type them. And I have no trouble with getting distracted with questions, both right before and up to when this happens, and even as it's going on, because the trick here is really about just watching this. And, if something comes to your mind, it might be coming to everybody else's mind as well. So shout it out. Yeah, that's a good idea there. You can't hear me, so I'm telling you to restart your computer anyway. Yes, that's what I would do. Okay. All right, so does anybody have any questions on topic or not until the party gets started here? Should you use limit orders is one that somebody PM'd me a minute ago. No, under absolutely no circumstances should you use limit orders or targets here. That's just suicide. I mean, and think about why, guys. What have I been saying to you for the last 2 weeks and 9 months before that, if you've been anywhere else in the group, is you have to focus on the now. Having any sort of bias about anything at a particular price level will crush you, because you'll be trying to be right instead of trying to make money. And that's a really dangerous thing to happen, particularly in the conditions of a fast market. Oh, let me ask you another question. How many people know what the definition, and there is an actual CME definition of fast market? Rules change during fast markets. Does anyone know what they are? Is the first 15 seconds of RTH a lot like danger? No, Steve, because the first 15 seconds of RTH is order imbalances that are very predictable. Those are very big traders entering the market, and they're smart. They're not reacting to news. They've been planning that all morning. So the behavior looks similar, but it's not the same, because we know how we're going to open. We don't know what the Fed announcement's going to be. We can guess, but we don't know. Do I pay attention to key levels, VWAP, during normal trading hours, not new relay? Yes, I do. When we talk about the setup of the open 5 and the first hour high and low summer, I will answer that question. So please ask it in that session, which will be in a couple of weeks. It's a good question. It fits better there. Okay, can anybody answer my fast markets question? I haven't seen a response to that yet. Okay, I will just spell it out. In fast markets, the CME has a loose set of rules. Yes, slippage is one of the things. For example, you're going to want to check with your broker, because many brokers will treat stop orders if they get jumped over, which happens in futures. If it doesn't trade right at that price, your stop will literally just cancel. Or it'll go market, and you'll get filled 20 points lower. So it's really important to understand your broker's policies, as well as understand the CME policies on fast market conditions. Okay, and I won't elaborate more on that. That'll just be research you guys can do on your own. Okay, we have 4 more minutes till our announcement. Let me tell you something else about the Fed announcement, because it kind of unfolds in a couple of different phases. The first thing that's going to happen is they're going to say whatever the interest rate announcement is. And everyone's pretty much got that priced in or gamed. We all know roughly what to expect there. So that'll be the first thing. And then, we'll chop around on that for a while. And then the press conference starts a little bit later. And, people literally are looking at like the chairman's facial expressions when he says stuff or answers questions or when reporters ask questions. So because of that, we can get some more chop. And then the third phase of this event will be after that's over, we will just see kind of the remnants. And there is a pattern that many of you may have seen before. I see it regularly. I don't really trade it, but I keep it in mind. If there is a very extreme move on an FOMC day like today, the vast majority of the time, I don't want to say it statistically like 80% or something, but the vast majority of the time, the next day that move will reverse. So put that in your, good stuff to know, not necessarily tradable, but it's an interesting statistic. And if you look back at a whole bunch of charts, you'll see over the last 20 years or so, that's fairly true. Way more than it's not. But trading that, hard to figure out a strategy that can properly game that. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Other questions? Did everyone under head fakes occur after news releases? Yeah, they do, but they do, and that's a really good question. You're having good questions, Summer. Head fakes, in other words, the market faking one way and then just dramatically going the other way. They do happen, but they're often the result of just a bunch of large orders banging into each other more than they are any, deliberate attempt by anybody smart to fake you out. The opening ones can be more manipulated because there's bots that do that, but in the news trades, it's pretty hard to pull that off. We were talking earlier this morning about trading oil around the inventory number. And there's bots that have been written to do that for 5 years, and they're really good. So, we'll talk about that trade more in the future, but be very, very careful thinking that your abilities are better than the markets, you guys, because, let me bring up this thing I constantly put in your faces, but this is a really good moment to remind you of it because it just couldn't be more true. Every time you log into the Facebook group, you see this, welcome to the hardest game in the world. And I read this every morning because, they have more money than me. They have faster computers than me. They're smarter than me. All those things are true. And, again, this is coming from a guy who likes to be the smartest guy in the room. So, take that with a huge recommendation not to be the smartest guy in the room. Do you decide before the release which market you'll focus on? Oh, that's also a very good question. That's the same as it always is. If it's really volatile, I will play the ES over the NQ because it's easier to manage volatility because the ticks move less, there's less movement. But in general, I like to watch oil, gold, and the ES at this point when the FOMC comes out. Steve, okay? Yes, and we have 1 minute, so we are going to remove that and minimize that. And here we go, okay. I am in my lottery account. I told you guys I have a bunch of different accounts. This is my lottery account, the account that I don't really care if I blow it up because it doesn't have a lot of money in it. And sometimes I'll take fun risks with a one lot. So we are trading live. So we'll see. I may not do anything, but I'll talk to you about what's in my head as it's happening. And hopefully that will be useful. So right now, you're seeing people getting flat ahead of the announcement. And since, the market's been strong, that means there's one of my announcements. My reminders, I told you I use this will even pop up and say, breathe, Jeff. This is a free alarm clock program. I'll share with you later if you want info on it. I'm going to zero my domes out here, and I'm going to constantly reline them up because they're moving so much. That's what I'm doing when I click on these buttons up here, guys. I'm just zeroing out the footprints and lining everything back up. Okay, so what am I seeing now here? Well, whatever the announcement is, it's not creating a lot of unexpected anxiety yet. That's what I'm seeing. But we are coming down to price levels that I find very interesting. Remember what I said, the low 20s, not so much. The 10s, yeah, why not? It's a relatively low risk long down there. Let's see, 1.75. Oh, is that the interest rate announcement? Yeah, okay. I literally don't look at the announcement till I'm done trading. I don't care. I want to see the reaction. Okay, now you can see the NASDAQ is its usual very thin. You see how there's a huge, between the bid and the offer right now, there's like 5 ticks. And so, you're already underwater $25 a trade if you're trading this. Okay, you can see investing.com just posted it, but obviously people already know it. My gut here is to buy this. I'm not doing it, but that's my initial gut would be to buy the S&P here. I'd rather see it at 23 or 20 or 10, but I'm just giving you my kind of instantaneous feedback. This is what we are seeing, and I'll stick that right there. So there you can see my linear regression channels. Remember, this is a 50 tick chart, 40 periods and 120 periods. So we're literally mathematically gaming the range within the range. So when both are sloping up like this, you want to be long or not in the market. That's basically the message. All the green bars here are saying the buys are overwhelming the sells. This is probably a decent long setup, but it's too close back to the value and the balance where we were. It's no longer a lottery ticket, so why chase it? So those of you that have trouble with fear of missing out, that's how you do it. The setup was great down there. It's not great here. I'm not trading. Now, you can see we might be getting a little bit of a rollover here, or we're flattening out. It's one of the two. By the way, the reason I don't use time charts for this, even with 30-second bars, you have no idea what's actually happening. Whereas over here, we can see the action as it's rolling over or consolidating. I hope you guys understand that's the value of these really fast tick charts with the LRCs on them. And if you put the one for the NASDAQ in there as well, let's see if we can get both of these side by side without taking up too much room. Okay, so that gives you a real good idea too, because the NASDAQ does tend to lead. You've heard me say that before. It'll turn up before the S&P does, generally. So the behavior I'm seeing right here is that nobody's willing to commit one way or another at all. And that's my interpretation too. However, going through the process we're going through right now is really important because we're really getting a sense for the status quo and what buyers feel value is right now. Any dips are getting bought, but nobody's getting really ambitious about driving us anywhere near even, the value weighted average of the day, which is right there, that blue line. So, and that's real time, as some of you, whatever you asked me it was called before, it's not yesterday's, it's today's. I don't care what happened yesterday. It's the discovering or building or whatever that term was. Okay, let's see. Question from Maria. Have you seen a lot of orders going long? Forget orders. Remove orders from your vocabulary. Once again, I'm jumping on you in fun. We don't care what people say they are going to do, Maria. We want to see what they are actually doing. So all these orders over here, I don't care. What I care about is the trades that are actually filling, because those are positions people are actually betting money on. Over here, they're saying, I'm going to buy 27. He might not when we get there, 27.50. These 185 orders. Ignore orders. Whatever you hear everywhere else, that's just 5 years ago. Even then, it wasn't really that useful. It certainly is not now. Is that tradable or consistent observation? Trades going off, yes. So make sure you're understanding, yes, okay, orders with trades. Okay, Maria, what you need to do is you need to break your idea of trades into different groups. There's current trades, or recent as it calls them in Sierra. This is the nomenclature in Jigsaw. There's total trades, which is kind of since the last time I reset it. So I'll reset it right now and you can see it start over. And then there's the volume profile, which is showing historically areas that had a lot of interest and back and forth. And so those are obviously inflection areas. So the point of control is the highest volume area. The volume weighted average is the average of the whole mess. So to answer your question, yes, trades going by are very, very important, but it's not individual prices. I'm looking for patterns in them. It's like right now, I'm seeing absolutely nothing here that is gameable. There's nothing that leads me to think I could make money by being smarter than the market. However, when I start seeing this behavior, that looks like a little bit of buying maybe over there. So maybe, you could maybe nibble that looking to get this area. Again, it just doesn't have enough reward for me. On the other hand, if it was like down there or something, that's a different ball game because then, I'm actually fading it. In here, I'm not. So Current trades 1 or 2 minutes before the announcement happens. No, again, Maria, you're trying to think that there's a way to be smarter than the market. You can't. You have to focus on the quality of your reaction to the behavior of the market's auction. You cannot predict, you cannot be there before it happens. Yes, you can get into a setup like in a Weiss spring and then be there before the event by watching the order flow. But you can't do that before the event because those are just people either getting flat or buying lottery tickets, and you don't want to do that. Does that answer your question? Are you the one that comes from an options background, Maria? I know Amy does. Yes, okay. That's why you're asking me those questions, because that's an option trader's thinking pattern, and it is not, Maria, a futures trader's thinking pattern. You can't think that way. You have to think in bets, not in options. Highly recommend that book for you, Maria, Thinking in Bets. It's posted in the workshop group in Slack. Okay, so this is a pretty uneventful news trade so far. However, I'm going to move these back over here. Once the conference starts, it could get interesting again, guys. So that we can continue with doing Q&A until the news conference gets going. You know, there's people always trying to look at facial expressions and make judgments based on them. Did that make sense, Maria, what I just said about the options? And I'm not sure if your yes there is to that or if you were answering something else. NQ looks super scary because there are no orders in the order book. Well, you know, again, I don't look at orders, but I just look at the overall how thick or thin it is. And if you look on my domes, I have them set up so they're constantly tabulating. That's what these yellow numbers are here. That's the total of all the asks and the total of all the bids for each instrument. So if that number is 200 or below, yeah, it's really thin. But sometimes, you know, some guy will put a big giant order in, you know, 10 ticks off. So, you know, you want to look in the area that's around the current trade. And by the way, that's exactly why CQG with only 10 levels isn't enough, because it'll be the 11th level that is significant. By the way, this doesn't mean there's a big seller up there. That could be a spoof. You know, that's why I ignore that stuff. We'll probably plow right through there. Yep, see? He bought them there. That's interesting. Now let's see if he was right or not. We'll see. Okay, yes, you understood me. Thank you, Maria. Oh, yes, Steve, you've asked me about this. When do I decide to clear trades? Ask me that during the open 5, because right now there's so much noise. You know, I pretty much just keep clearing them because the last couple of seconds don't matter. And that's why these meters are so useful, because this one on the left of each of these is accumulating 5 minutes of action. And basically over 5 minutes, we have a little bit of buy bias, which indicates why the bottom hasn't fallen out. But beyond that, there's really not a whole lot going on here. Here's the cumulative delta down here, guys. And you can see, you know, over the course of the whole day, this news has not really impacted us at all. So, you know, you could buy it strictly based on that parameter right there. You know, the order flow is reasonably positive, but, you know, I don't look for excuses to trade. This is something I was elaborating about with Amy. And you should all take it to heart. If you're going to do this well, your default position should be flat and in cash and not in the market. And, you know, then you can make good decisions when you're going in and out, whether or not those are good decisions. Is this question coming in for the, okay, I'll come back to that. There was a question in Slack. I don't think it pertained to this. Okay, yes, you're a mixed bag right now. Options, order flow, EMAs, okay. I would strongly encourage you, Maria, and please make an appointment to talk to me one-on-one privately as well. I would strongly encourage you to disregard all that stuff and stop doing option trades and remove moving averages from your charts and just focus on learning order flow right now. And you know, that other stuff is great base knowledge, but it's just going to confuse you. Trust me. I mean, I come from 40 years of that. And the hardest thing teaching people that have learned all that stuff how to do this is they know too much already. So there you go. Okay, let me look back. Okay, interest in cumulative data, delta, if it goes up without the price going up, it is a sign no, that is not true. Please watch the video of how to misinterpret cumulative delta, Samer, the one from Axia. All the cumulative delta tells you is the totals. And I don't really make any decision based on it. Bring it back up so you guys can see it. I mean, if you look at the actual bar by bar delta, the cumulative makes sense looking that way. Do I imply because it's positive by close to 23,000 that that's bullish and it's going with price? No, I don't. I'm much more interested in bar by bar. It's not absorption or distribution. No, you're reading into it. It may mean that, but much more important is when it happened, not the total for the day. I want to see, if I'm seeing absorption at the lows, then I want to see all those giant bars down there at the lows. And so that's really the answer to your question. See all this green down here? That means the lows were getting bought. That's what you should be looking at, not the cumulative. The cumulative can be very misleading. Okay, let's see. I said that I don't care what happened yesterday, for example, to trade today. Do I only trade what happened today? Okay, I've explained this a few times. I know there's a bit of a language barrier on this one, and I'm going to go into it in a lot of detail with the individual setup workshops as opposed to this kind of ad hoc workshop session today. But the short answer to your question is that I look at those previous levels, for example, if we're looking this range chart, I look at the last few days, here was the last 5 of that week, and then here's what's been going on this week. All I'm looking at is for areas that might have been of interest before. But other than that, the low of a day or the high of a day, a lot of people think that those are significant. I have never seen a strategy that effectively mathematically games those. So yeah, sometimes people buy them, sometimes people sell them. But again, the standard answer to your question is the answer for everything. I hate to say it, but what's important when we get to those prices is the order flow there. They are nothing more than potential inflection points or areas of interest. But beyond that, they mean nothing. So I use them strictly in a sense of context. And if we bring up the process that I've shown you guys a few times and you will see more of, which is this thing. This is how I stay organized and keep my shit together during the day. Remember, step 2, context. That's where price levels go. That's about, what's the intraday structure, what are extreme boundary prices, but big red highlighted in yellow, order flow overrides everything at any time. So that's why you just can't really get married to any prices or anything like that. And we'll go over that in a lot more detail. Don't worry. With the tick chart showing strength, do we buy now since it's a balanced area? Okay, tick charts. First of all, what instrument are you talking about? Judhar? Yes, okay. All right, let's stop talking that way. I'm going to jump on you guys again. It's in fun, but the tick chart is not showing strength. The tick chart is showing a range between 34 and 31 that is consolidating between 32 and 33 with virtually no bias. The moves up have reasonably high volume. The lower highs have high volume. The lows have high volume. There is absolutely no bias whatsoever at the moment in this picture. So I see no edge in being long or short here. It looks like we have value. Go over here and look at the volume profile again. We are sitting right on the point of control, the highest volume point of the day. We are sitting right on the volume weighted moving average, which is the blue bar. So, the only conclusion you could take if you were being honest with yourself right now is we're perfectly balanced. There's no edge either direction. So, that's the answer. There's no trade. Now, could you get in here and scalp the order flow? Sure. Yeah, we could do that. You want to have some fun doing that? Let's see if I can see anything that looks interesting right now. While you guys are queuing up more questions. Good, I see you got it. All right, so you understood that. That was your next question on scalps. Yeah, if we had some momentum or something scalpable here, I would maybe be playing, but we don't have edges, we don't have ledges, we don't have momentum. We're not playing the open 5, we're not playing the first hour high or low. So if we pull up the setup book here, unfortunately, we're kind of dry on setups. Let's see, high Momo. That's usually the one I would play on a news event, but the momentum is dreadful. Might be picking up. See, it's testing that high end, and maybe we're going up here, but do I watch that on this chart? No, I don't watch it there. I go over here, and I watch that on the depth of market. And what's happening here? Is this truly a buy move, or is it just consolidating in this area and filling in some more volume? Well, we are getting NASDAQ leading, and the RTY and the YM are moving. This could be a long. Maybe. I'm more inclined to fade it at the other end. Maybe sell it up here. Look at this 1,300 contracts. Yeah, right. If we got up there, we'd probably blow right through that price. But, you know, that's what people do. They display orders. That could be real, might not. See, they're selling into this. This is why it's really hard to get long there, even though if you look at the tick channel, you know, you needed to be in this pretty quick. I wouldn't be jumping in here. Again, you know, this is how I avoid fear of missing out. It's getting sold up here. Would I scalp it and short it here? Maybe. If I was really focused and not talking to you and I'd had more coffee than I've had today, I might try that. I'd really like to sell right there and right there and right there. That's what I mean by boundary prices, guys. I mean, if we just blow through here and it gets real thin and, you know, let's say we take out some of this or we bounce off of that, whatever, those would be good places because, again, we get asymmetric. Here, you know, again, you always want to ask yourself, all right, if we got long here, who's shorting? Well, anybody fading in this range is shorting. And yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I'm not sure. The momentum still continues. We're about to break out on the NASDAQ to a new high for the day. So it's still good momentum, but it doesn't have a lot of energy, does it? This is a good time to watch the meters. They're showing buying activity, but it doesn't have a whole lot of, that was stops getting hit, by the way, there you just saw. They just took out some NASDAQ stops, but no follow through whatsoever. You know, it's not like those guys are now screaming and buying to get long. You know, it's just kind of ebb and flow, ebb and flow. You know, on a 30-second chart, it's a little clearer that we're at the ledge up there. And normally those are longs. Yes, you know, you hear me say that all the time, but let's look at the context of this one. Not particularly good context. That's a previous high from the overnight. In the NASDAQ, I don't know. You know, again, I'm not saying this isn't a good trade. It's just, it's not making me excited, so I'm not going to take it. But doesn't mean it wouldn't work as a long. If it goes a little farther with this lack of energy, I like the short. Judhar is saying nobody's selling. Yeah, nobody's buying either. And now they're selling. Look at that. So let's reset that again and see what the net is always right here, guys. So that's the net of the total. And that's why I reset it up here near highs. So it kind of gives me a real good idea. And right now, the sellers are dominant at these higher levels. And I can see why. I mean, there's a really good odds that we're going to drift back down into here just because there's not a lot of energy. So everybody's seeing, you know, what it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to see this yourself yet, but do you see why I'm describing the action the way I am? Am I looking at the jigsaw meters once in a while just for context? Yeah, I use those two different ways. I use them for context, and then when I'm actually entering a trade or exiting a trade, I'll use them for kind of a way to check myself and make sure I'm seeing it right. Like the meters right now are not convincing me this is a long, so it would keep me from taking a long there, yes. And in fact, it's convincing me that the idea that a short was right. And so, yeah, we just took that and okay, so we just picked up 25 bucks, or actually, no, that was half of that. It's about 16 bucks, I think. That's my point. You know, if I wasn't talking to you guys and I was really paying attention, you know, the whole move up there, I was really seeing that as weak, so I probably would have shorted that earlier and, you know, maybe scaled in and out of it. But, you know, that's how quick I will go in and out. And I don't know, just for fun, let's see what that was. So, yeah, we made 8 and 16 on those last two. So grand total of 25, but yeah, I'm doing this just for example. You guys understand that. We're not actually trying to make money. Just forget us in trade, explain that. I will do that on the Open 5 and some other things, summer, and just let you guys watch me trade live, but this is just not in a good environment to do it. But you're hearing my thought process. There's just no way I would get long here unless we just blew over 40. I would look at every opportunity to fade it because I'm just not seeing anybody, you know, being aggressive. And so what does that mean? All right. So go back to the message of order flow. If I'm going to get long here, in order for that to be a profitable trade, buyers have to come in behind me, push the price up, and then I need a long enough period to sell and take my profits. So what I was seeing when I saw us up there and sold that was the odds were the other way. I was seeing a lot more energy on selling and what looked like a chance to jump in and grab a couple of ticks real fast. And so that's why I go that. I have no bias whatsoever, though. I don't say we're in an uptrend or the tick is going up or it's trending up. None of that. You know, this is just real time. You know, what's happening in the channels, what's the volume on the swings. And because, you know, we're discretionary traders here, guys, remember, you know, this isn't mechanical. That's the issue you've got to learn to deal with, Maria. there aren't going to be really mechanical ideas of how to do it. And it quite frankly is an art form, but if you can learn the art, it can really improve your profitability across your mechanical trading as well, just because you get much better at finding the places to enter and exit. Okay, what takes the longest to get to in order flow? Darren is asking me. Ooh, that's a really good question. You know what? I was asked that by a lady that I was mentoring all of last year. It was a very frustrating mentoring period because it's someone I know well and someone who has a lot of structural bias in their own life, which makes it hard to learn things without bias. And I mean that from life experience and religion and things like that. And so after banging my head against the wall for a lot of last year with that particular process, I went back to my own teaching and went back to one of my mentors and sent him all the emails and all the text chats and trying to understand, if there's a way to get through this easier. And his answer was really very simple. And that's kind of why with her and with you guys, I went to back to this LRC thing. The short answer is learn to focus on the now. Darren, that's critical. I mean the now, not the now 3 minutes ago, the now 5 minutes ago, not the now yesterday, the now. Like right now, there's buyers in the NASDAQ. Should I get long? No, there's not a lot of conviction there, but right now they're buying. So if I'm short, I'm gone. Okay, so that's an example. And then the other thing that my mentor came back to me on in that educational process with that woman that I'm speaking of was he said that, your skill, he's talking to me, your skill, Jeff, in looking at these domes is seeing the patterns within the patterns. And so that's the answer to your question, Darren. And that's why, putting this up there can be useful because it teaches you that there's an ebb and flow and that there's a rhythm and that rhythm, the amount of volume on the swings and the amount of conviction of buying and selling and the total volume in the swings, those things can actually teach your brain the patterns that ultimately you're going to trade here. But having seen them there, when you're watching them here, your head will visualize, I can't point, but your head will visualize this. Is that making any sense, Darren? It's really a skill to train your brain to take something that's vertical and literally going up and down and to put it into context with ranges. That's the hard thing to learn. But I think after that experience last year, my experience with my mentor, who's a very good trainer of trainers, that's his background. He goes back to like Microsoft with me 30 years ago. We've been training tech people for decades. So we both have a lot of experience with how you get complicated messages across, like to programmers and things like that. So, imagine teaching, SQL Server to people that have no idea what you're talking about, So that's an example. So Darren, and it really takes seat time. You guys hear me say that over and over again, but I'm not kidding. It's just sitting there and staring at it and teaching your brain what it's seeing. That's how you learn to get good at this. My settings but these are instrument dependent. So the ones that I'm using right now, and with volatility, I might adjust that a little bit, but 10 ticks in NASDAQ, 50 in the ES. For gold and for the oil market, I use 10 ticks as well. So here's an example of what that looks like over there. And these are on my monitors out on the wings. I'm just dragging them in so you guys can see them. I can see them all the time. So, okay, let's see. Ready. All right, this is about as long as I wanted to make this little Q&A and trading around news event session. So I'm going to open it up for any other general questions, and if there aren't any, then we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. How do you use the time and sales info compared to what the dome is already showing? Oh, that's also a really good question. Okay, the dome is showing me at any given moment the volume profile, which is very important. It's also showing me orders that I really don't care about other than to occasionally comment like on that big block that was sitting up there. I really focus on the current trades, which I'm resetting now, that one. And those are literally every time it hits that price, it starts over. And it redoes that price level with new prints. And then the totals, which are the totals since I last reset it. And so those are independent of each other. So one way to get good at this is to learn to consolidate that with the block behavior here. So, you know, if I'm watching that and I'm seeing lots of blocks going by on the direction that I want to trade, that's a good thing. If I'm seeing no blocks going by, but lots of little onesies, then I know the retail players are there, and they usually are in the wrong places, but not always. You know, sometimes these guys break their trades up too. So I watch blocks for patterns of like here, you know, where that's a bunch of behavior at one price level. So 34 is an interesting point. Obviously, I can see why. It's the edge of the value area. The value area, this highlighted area being about 70% of the volume for the day, and this being all the volume for the day, okay? So I will explain a lot more about what I'm looking for on these as we do some other order flow sessions, but again, you know, this is not a structured one. I don't have you guys following an agenda. I don't want to elaborate on that too much. Some people may not have chosen to come because they didn't think we were going to talk about that either. So if you guys want to do just a reading the tape session, I can work that in. I've had that suggestion. In fact, I'll tell you what, there's a channel in the Slack guys called Workshop Requests. If enough of you post that there, I will do it. So look for the workshop_request channel and post that request there. Okay, I will take one more question. The totals are reset manually and the currents are reset how? Okay, that's a really good question. All right, there are two ways to reset currents. Every time the price gets there, it will start it over. So see, we haven't traded 59 since those 4 went off there. So the next time it gets up there, it'll wipe that 4 out and start over. Or you can see it's doing it here. See, there's nothing there, and now it's putting those 10 prints, 5 prints. So it's just whatever happened the last time. And so I can erase that, and then this is just totaling up whatever happened since I erased it the last time. So this is a way of totaling the currents and letting them reset themselves or just wiping them all together. And you can also, you know, wipe them one direction or the other. Again, this is not a class on how to use the Jigsaw Dome. If you want to learn more about that, go to the Jigsaw help screens. You can see the same things on footprints, but the reason I don't use footprints is because by the time it shows up there, it's usually too late. That's why I use, you know, 10 tick charts instead. We can explain that more, and you know, once I get the new computer set up, if I have some time, I'll show you a version in Ninja 8 with footprints. But I strongly discourage you from getting too married to footprints. You should only have a footprint for something like this. So this is the one that I will replace, my 5-minute. This will be a footprint chart on my Ninja 8 version, nothing else. And I will not use it for trade decisions. Again, I'll use it to just game the open 5 and the first hour low. But this 5-minute bar here on a footprint is going to just be way too much information to be tradable. And you know, I know you guys love the way those look, and they are good tools, but much more important to learn to use the tools. Remember, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, good trader can take any toolbox that's a good toolbox and execute with it. You get married to your tools when there's an update or when the market conditions change, you'll be in the dark because you'll be using your tool's behavior, not using your tool to measure the market's behavior. Critical point. Look how NQ turned at the high of the day. Yes, it did. He's talking about that. Remember, I was telling you before that, you know, if we got boundary prices I liked, I would have sold them. If I wasn't talking, you know, that would have been an example of what I'm talking about, that or that. You just have virtually no risk. If you'll be right immediately, and then the trade just goes your way. You know, it never goes negative. So, and again, the short here, the same story. Now, do you want to start playing that here? That's how you avoid fear of missing out. No, the trade's over. You probably should have taken profits already. If you aren't, do it. Okay. Well, that was an excellent point in question. What is the name? All right, again, we are not going to do questions about indicators in individual sessions. Ask me that offline. If I have time, I will deal with it. But Steve, I'm going to use that question again to reiterate. This workshop is to teach those of you here about price action. Indicators are tools, nothing more. I will answer that privately. Put it in the Slack group, please, about the one that I'm using. Okay, are there any other questions before we wrap up this particular session? I lost the meeting controls, hang on. So now you guys can ask questions and I can't see them. Okay, this always happens with, hang on one more second. There's one of them, it should be over here. There it is, okay. Zoom has this horrible panel that disappears behind the charts. It only does this in meetings. There it is, okay. Now I got it back. Okay. If the price is moving, but not the total delta, okay. No, I answered that already. The cumulative delta, in my opinion, is people read way too much into it. Bar by bar delta on an interval that is pertinent to the trade you're looking at is the only thing that I think is relevant with with respect to that. Palmer. Okay, guys, that's going to be the end of this workshop session for trading events, news events. You're referring to the delta number in my DOM. Okay, anything that's on my DOMs, if you guys want to learn more about that, Jigsaw has really comprehensive help screens, and I've posted them a number of times. I will do it again. I just want to encourage you guys not to spend a lot of time asking me stuff like that, because what you're doing is you're spending your time in this educational forum on material that is not a good use of your time or mine. These are answers you can go get yourself and you can read, and they're easy to find. So whenever I get a question like that, that's going to be the way I respond to it. And of course, my little chat thing disappeared again. Oh, this is the one thing I really hate about this platform. Sorry, guys, my little bar disappeared and I can't see the chat for a second every time this happens, and there's no way to make it stay on top. And there we go. Okay. All right, I got it back. Okay, I hope, let's see, I wanted to just share this. That is where you guys can go get answers to what those things in Jigsaw mean. It's just not productive use of time for me to answer one-on-one questions about Jigsaw in these sessions, okay? All right, everyone, thank you very much. I will see you in the Slack group.